Okay, now what can I do with this clip? That'll work. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, I am Many Ninjas, and this is Mission 8 of my playthrough of Double Dragon Neon on the Double Dragon difficulty. You'll have to forgive me for skipping the obligatory Skeletor reference, but this turns out to be a very long mission, so we're gonna cut right to the action. Young Billy has now successfully reached the second part of the lab scenario, otherwise known as genetic research. Having gone this far, the game decides to pull no punches at this point and throws you immediately into a group brawling scenario, where you happen to be running into a couple of Lindas and Williamses, and the level of competition will only go up from here. If you're able to weather this first part of the stage, the rest of the stage is actually fairly easy in comparison, and I would include the boss fight as part of that equation. In hindsight, I probably should have waited to use those barrels till a bit later, because they dispensed health items which probably would have been handy in later waves for this particular section of the stage. Mind you, one of the barrels that this dropped, nice little soda there, used to drop a 1-up, so the game has noticeably become a little less generous. And now we move on to wave 2 of this particular section, being a few Williamses and the very annoying Roxys. Once again, I remind you that the threats here are not the Williams themselves, but the Roxys that you're trying to avoid as you're beating up the Williamses. When it comes to your health at this particular difficulty level, the saying easy come, easy goes applies. Unfortunately now I'm going to have to wave this particular set of enemies a little longer, and hopefully that barrel in the back will have another health power-up that I can use in order to save myself. Ouch, Billy. Fortunately, as I've just demonstrated, when you dizzy an enemy that is carrying a weapon, they will drop the weapon. And in the case of these vials, when they drop it, the vials break, and the effects that would apply do, which, in this case, kills Billy outright. Getting past that little mishap, as you can see, Wave 2 here involved 2 Ichisumis, as well as 2 Lindas, which are fairly easy to dispatch on their own. Even as a group, they're fairly easy to control because the Ichisumis, even at this level, still have a fairly low amount of health. And after that, now we have 2 Shuns, as well as 2 Scientist Williams. Unfortunately, Shuns happen to be a bit more difficult to deal with. And of course, Williams at this point have buffed health values, so they're just... basically, they're still kind of fun, let's be honest here. I do happen to like the new uniforms given to Shun here, but unfortunately the new uniforms probably mean that they've been given extra health, which will make them a little harder to kill, or at least a little more time consuming to kill. It's not exactly a good thing to have enemies like Shun with extra health there, because they're already kind of hard to get rid of on a normal basis due to the amount of moves they happen to have themselves. In Shun's direct case, you have her standing jabs, which are pretty much in the knockdown blow. You have her aerial dive, her aerial knife throw, a sliding attack, where she kind of brushes forwards and then knocks you upward to be juggled even more so after. And then of course she has her wake whip attack, if you happen to be standing too close after knocking her down. Of course, once you get them back to being one-on-one, everything is fairly easy to manage. And now that we're just about done here, now we have the return of the 2 bootleg brothers and Roxy. That's just there now. As if Bimmy and Jammy here weren't bad enough, now I have to avoid being dive bombed from the sky as well. That's just peachy. Fortunately, our bootleg brothers do not have the spin kick. I do believe the game plan here will be to take out at least one of the brothers, and then I'll be able to dispatch the second one, as well as the Roxy, with relative ease because of how slow Bimmy and Jammy move. Of course, I should add, as part of that plan, to avoid dying via a Bobo counterpunch, which I have to be doing very poorly right now. And of course, getting tossed also does not go well with the plan. Okay, we're still in the first section of the stage, and I'm already down to 0 lives. As I said, this is the hard part of the stage. At least on the bright side, there's no more Roxy, so it's really just dealing with the 2 brothers at this point. Did I say 2 brothers? I meant 1, and now I mean none. Which thankfully means this section of the stage is now wrapped up. Hopefully, the rest will go fairly smooth from here on out. Alright, moving on to part B of the stage. The game is generous enough to throw you a bonus beast in order to beat up, in order to get some extra items back, which in this case oddly enough didn't include a single health item, but that's alright because we didn't actually need one. And now, okay, Williams back to that particular dive kick, and as you can see, Williams has dropped the gun. As Billy, it's very pointless to pick up a gun other than to use it so that Williams can't, because clearly Billy does not know how to use a gun. Really, Billy, it doesn't take an expert to tell you that the end that happens to have the handle and the trigger, you don't use that to hit your opponent with. But of course, since this is a teen-rated game, you can't very well see the protagonist using the gun as it's meant to be used. But of course, if you're one of the opponents, you can use the gun just fine. Although it doesn't actually kill you. Go figure. In fact, I believe if you were to compare the damage of a gunshot to a whip crack or a bat swing, it would about be the same. This particular section includes just a few small waves of Scientist Williamses, as well as a few hover bizzles for good measure, which thankfully aren't too difficult, although the fact that I've done quite a few errors at this point, draining my health here, have not been doing me any favors. I believe I'm going to have to pick it up just a little bit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that could have gone a lot better. Now we find ourselves back on our last life, and it's back to clutch time all over again. We're going to play it a little conservatively for the moment being, just to get past this section and move on to somewhere a bit more simple. The one silver lining is that the hover bizzles remain incredibly easy to dispose of, leaving the Scientist Williamses on their own, which, as long as you make sure you don't get shot, are still fairly manageable. Barring any slips of gameplay, of course. Alright there, got them cornered, which means it'll be a little easier to run through them. And got at least one down now. And there goes the other one. Okay, now we can proceed to the next part of the stage. A few more dropping grains for good measure, sure, why not? Alright, poorly timed roll, not so good. And a shun for good measure. Okay then, let's see if we can't knock her underneath the crane in order to get by the section a little easier. Trick here will be to get her under the crane and then keep her there. Alright, from some basic observation, it turns out that you can't actually keep her there. The game will automatically bounce the enemies back out. Oh well, no matter. It should still be fairly easy in order to knock them down in there in the first place. Which hopefully, if it's anything like the damage it does to me, will take a large chunk of health off them. At least I'm really hoping it's taking quite a bit of health off them, because I am not doing so well right now with these shuns in such close quarters. Shun is really an enemy type you prefer to have some space to work with, if for no other reason than to help dodge them a lot better. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that zoom out means that I am good to go to the next section, let's see, and the game is thankfully generous enough to give me some health to work with. So we're still down on last life, but at least we have a full bar of health to work with. Alright, this is just a single Roxy right now, and even on this section with the falling platforms, it shouldn't be too difficult to get rid of her. And I'll proceed to get rid of her anyway, just because of how much this character type has been vexing me during these past 2 stages. Also, as you can probably guess, that yellow arrow that's pointing downward to that particular platform, yes, it means something, ladies and gentlemen, which I'm about to demonstrate. If the game gives you any kind of special indication for any reason, it's usually to reveal a secret of some sort. In this case, one of the hidden shops.
Dragon in China shop.
As you probably noticed, I have been doing a bit of grinding off camera in order to rack up all the different mithril upgrades I need, and use them in order to buy a few more upgrades to the mixtapes, which I'm currently trying to fill in a bit more for a healing touch here. Purchasing an extra life right now would seem like a good idea, but I still believe there's a fairly good chance, since we already got through the hard part of the stage, that I can still get through the remainder of it on this one life. After all, although there's a bit of the stage still left, there's honestly nothing that's so difficult that I should need an extra life for. Although if the game is not kind enough to give me an extra life, I would gladly accept it though. And you can. Alright then, the action has stopped at this point, with another few waves of enemies that are being led, much like yourself, into the nice little crane hands in the background there. The general idea is that you are supposed to help yourself out here by knocking your enemies into the crane section and then letting the hazards do the job for you. While this works out fairly well in other difficulties, here it takes a little bit of time to get through because of just how much health they have at this point. So it's actually going to take a few crane drops in order to actually kill anybody. Hazard aside, this section honestly isn't too bad, because the game only throws a few enemies your way, and even with these inflated health values, it isn't too bad. It's actually quite fair at this point still. And now we're going to get an example of just how many hits these otherwise common enemies can probably absorb before they end up dying. Linda had taken a bit more extra abuse ahead of time, so she didn't last too long there, but if she had had more health, she would have actually survived at least, I'd say, 2 more drops, maybe a third one even, before finally succumbing to her injuries. And Williams will be kind enough to demonstrate a bit more of how many hits they can actually take. Alright, and with that said and done, we'll proceed to the next part of the stage, taking the soda with us in order to help boost the health a little bit more. Mind you, that soda was a bit excessive because we have more soda right here, which is very important because you happen to be at the boss fight right now. Admittedly, the game probably means for you to reserve those sodas a bit more in case you need them. Now your target for this particular fight are the 2 wolves at the end of the arms. At the end of each attack pattern they throw your way, they then stop, go back to the side of the screen, and then just kind of hang out for a while until the next one begins. Of course, you have the giant kind of plant head in the background with teeth that throws in occasional projectiles just for good measure, because otherwise this would be way too easy. As a side note, I still find it somewhat confusing that you can actually dizzy a plant, but that's Double Dragon Neon logic for you. I should probably mention that the toothed plant head at the back actually has a few different patterns of projectiles that can throw your way, as well as an actual helpful pattern, which has it spitting out, rather than bones and skulls, it actually spits out health items. And I think I've even seen a 1-up come out of there at one point. But for the most part, it's either sodas or batteries. Just to mention a little ahead of time, the bulbs actually have 2 different attack forms. This first part, where they're still very generic bulbs, is honestly pretty boring. It's just them constantly rising upward and then trying to slam at you the whole way. And it really doesn't get interesting until you beat them up enough to go into their second forms. As you can probably tell, this boss fight is why I had actually cut the intro short. At this particular difficulty, the bulbs, in their first form, drag on a lot because of all the health they have. Alright, with how much that right bulb is flashing, it hopefully shouldn't be too much longer now before it goes into its second form. Alright, one more dizzy, and okay, now it's blinking really fast. It should be just about ready now. No, a shove Billy will not do the trick. You need to use a real attack. Come on now. Okay, dodge a few more bones for good measure. And get into gleam mode, which unfortunately won't last long enough to use. Yeah, okay, we're on gleam mode. And finally! Does that shark look familiar to you, ladies and gentlemen? You probably would have recognized it from all the different screens that are in the back of this particular set of stages. At this point of the game, the Shark Ball gains a few extra attacks to go along with its general charge attack. And speaking of attacks, that's the... What is the shark doing right now? I believe that was an eye missile, ladies and gentlemen. You don't see that every day. Before that silly attack came up, the plant in the background had demonstrated a bit of kindness by throwing me a lot of free health items. More than I actually needed. More than any single person would actually need. And thankfully enough, the first head is now down, so I can start working on the left bulb now. As you can probably guess, the second form does not have nearly as much health as the first form. Which is a good thing because the first form has more than enough health at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, it really is just a waiting game at this point for this boss fight to be over, because with only one bulb to worry about, you basically just wait until it stops enough for you to attack it, and anything that the head in the background is doing is fairly easy to dodge when you're not worrying about too many things going on at once. Mind you, you just have to remember to pay attention to what the attack pattern is in order to dodge it appropriately. In this case, you have to jump over it. To projectiles as they're being shot out, give off a shadow, which usually gives a good hint of where they'll actually be landing, or the general direction they'll be going in. Alright, it's starting to blink at this point, which is a good sign. To be quite frank, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter what difficulty this particular boss comes in, it's fairly easy no matter what you do. As long as you make sure you dodge the few attacks it does throw at you, basically it's pre-mid-range. I don't even think that giant plant mouth in the background does any new attacks in this particular difficulty, which pretty much means that if you got the general pattern down from the first fight in the earlier difficulties, you basically figured the boss out at this point. Now that I think about it, Skullmagan nor the Mech Rider did anything different either, so it's basically the same boss as before, but with added damage. And health values, of course. Finally, we revealed the real form of the left bulb now. T-Rex head. In addition to this new laser attack that it gains in this form, it also gets its own version of the triple dash that the shark head also demonstrated earlier. See? Ouch. Unfortunately, should the dash actually hit you, it does quite a bit of damage. And the plant head in the background was nice able to give more health items as well as power bars, but it came a little too late to save Billy there. Oh well, we find ourselves back on our last life, but at this point of the stage, it doesn't really matter. And that was pretty much just a lucky hit there. This boss is basically done and has no chance to survive. Bravado aside, I'm gonna just dodge these particular ram dashes and wait until that pauses back there in order to get my hits in, because it would be really silly to die at this point, especially when I'm already so close to killing the boss. Alright, this boss is just being a tad annoying at this point with the random spamming of projectiles in the background, as well as the constant dashes, which are really just prolonging this fight longer than it needs to go. But with all the flashing that's going on, it's really just a few hits from being over. Because once you dispatch this left bulb and there are no bulbs left, which should be happening any second now, silly boss, I just said any second now. Oh, good grief. Seriously, Mariantu, you're just making it harder for yourself. Just die already. finally that's done with, the middle head will reveal its core, and it will basically go down to one hit of anything. With that, this stage is now over. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, with this boss down, we move to the last 2 stages of the game. The next one being very October appropriate, the Haunted Forest. See you next time.